Hey everyone, it's Damien, Sleepy Reader. Just got home from the comic book store. Had a bunch of books on my pull, and then I also grabbed a few more off the racks. And I also hope to just give you some quick comic book thoughts on other comics I've read in the past couple of weeks, because I keep neglecting to make videos that I would like to make, or keep not being able to find as much time as I would like to have. Anyway, let's start with the comics I picked up this week. I'll start from the back of my little pile here. There's my pile. It's quite a lot of comics when you add in the ones I picked up at the shop after looking through my pull. So here we have Bug issue 2, the you might say Jack Kirby tribute comic, I suppose. The cover band, like I don't know, like a Led Zeppelin cover band or something. We got the new Superman. I've now keyed into the fact that the new Superman, not only has it gone up $1 in price, but it no longer has Victor Bogdanovich on it as the regular artist. The person I thought was just a fill-in artist, Tan, not Philip Tan, but the other Tan, is now the full-time artist as far as I can tell, which is a shame. I really liked Bogdanovich's art. There's nothing wrong with Tan's art, but it just makes the comic book that much less tempting to me. I think the colors are by someone different too, and they have a darker, grayer look to them that, to me, is less fitting with the comic. So both the art, to some extent, and the color even further, make this a less perfect match of artistic visions, in my opinion. So anyway, I guess I'll continue getting it for now. It's been one of my favorite sort of fun popcorn reads of Rebirth, amongst many good popcorn reads in Rebirth. Here's the American Gods from Dark Horse. The covers on this are amazing. The interior art is much duller as a matter of course, and the storytelling is very plotting and overly faithful to the novel, I suppose. I suspect I will eventually drop this, but for now I keep getting it. I really love that cover. Action Comics. The next Action Comics, we'll see Revenge, where all these Superman villains are ganged together to get revenge on Superman. It really seems like overkill. I don't quite get why they're doing that at this point. Somehow it feels like a distraction. I don't feel like we built up to it that much for such a giant, gangbang of villains. It feels like there should have been more build up to it, in my opinion. Especially since this is Rebirth, and we haven't, a lot of these villains are just being introduced to us now, for if you were a new reader in Rebirth, so that it might seem odd to have so many villains from the past who hate Superman showing up if you've kind of picked up with Superman and Action Comics in Rebirth. Green Valley, this is either the last or second to last issue, number 9. I believe this is the last issue. I really enjoyed this. This feels like a thicker issue. It was $1 more, and yeah, it's definitely thicker. So kind of doing the Mark Millar thing of doing a double-sized last issue or a bonus-sized last issue. I don't hold it against them. They've been holding the price on this to $2.99 and giving us a lot of story and entertainment in Green Valley. Also kind of a popcorn book, but not superheroes. Oh, look at that, Birthright. Their price is still $2.99, and nice double spreading cover. Double, whatever you call it. Open. What do you call it when the cover goes on both covers, both sides of the cover? Full cover spread. I don't know. It's not a gatefold because it doesn't open out. Yeah, that's a pretty good cover. It looks much better when you look at the whole thing rather than just the front cover. I don't know if that means we're heading towards a climax. I hope this goes on for a bit longer. I still want to learn more about the world of Terranos, although we have learned a lot about the kind of relationships between all the people, or we've advanced a lot on that level. It's been a good read for me from issue 1 till now. Legion of Superheroes meets Bugs Bunny. I'm really psyched for this. More to have a light-hearted Legion of Superheroes comic than to have a Bugs Bunny comic. I mean, I love Bugs Bunny cartoons, but I've never been dying to have the Legion of Superheroes meet a Looney Tunes character, but I have been sort of thinking about how I currently enjoy lighter comics, and Legion of Superheroes really lends itself well to... They have some good, dark, grown-up Legion of Superheroes stories, but also a fine tradition of the fun Silver Age kind of comics. And they have, you know, all these characters with all these powers, and it just seems to embody the fun of superheroes to me. Oops, sorry for bumping that. Not that it matters. Okay. Oh, and I'm really, really psyched for this. Galaxy of Brutality, issue 2. It does not say... Oh, yes, it does say Space Riders right there. So it's Space Riders Volume 2 or Space Riders Galaxy of Brutality. Last issue, the art was just delicious. Alex Zurich, the artist, has really, really grown. I think I might have flipped who the artist and writer was, because they're credited... Yeah, I think the artist is credited first on the cover, Zurich, and then Rangel Jr., the writer. And I felt like the writing, it was hard to tell from the first issue if the overall plot was going to be as good as this sort of mind-blowing black light kind of poster art that we get here. But the uniqueness of this art just makes this a wonderful comic to get. And I definitely want it in floppies because I want to view the art in the best possible way. But I also hope that someday it comes out in like an oversized hardback. Those are my two favorite forms. Oversized hardbacks with really good binding, without gutter loss, or getting it in the floppy, particularly when you're getting comics from the indies that don't have ads all over the place. This, no doubt, will have ads all over the place, but unlike Bugs Bunny, for some reason I'm more excited by seeing Marvin the Martian interact with the DC universe. I don't know why. He always tickled my fancy. The Martian Manhunter's always been a character that seems to have a lot of potential to me, but I've never really read a story except for the Darwin Cook New Frontier comic. I haven't read much else that I can remember where I thought, wow, Martian Manhunter is really good. But we'll see. Oh, yuck. This is written by Steve Orlando, so I already will lower my expectations. Still, I will probably have fun. I think he might have a co-writer with Barbieri, and Barbieri's a good writer, so there you go. Speaking of writers who I once didn't like, but now like, Tinian Jr., or Tinian the Fourth. There's been a 2 or 3 weak issues in this Batman Detective run, but overall, again, great sort of popcorn gothic writing and tangled webs of personalities and stuff has been a really fun read. It looks like last issue must have been kind of a one-shot point. I hope we get Spoiler coming back in all of her issues, but now we've got something called Intelligence. Last we were with Batman and Friends, they said they were going to go look for a magic solution to their problems. So we'll see if that's what's going on here. Shadows on the Grave. I quite liked last issue. I'm struggling to get into the story at the back. That's the continuing story, although it has some good art and good moments. But loving the art. Corbin in black and white is just as good as Corbin in color. I don't know if it was on purpose that he's on this cheaper feeling paper to give it a pulpier feel. Now, I have a couple of comics that I'm reading in this format that I'm starting to say, oh, it's kind of fun to have the newsprint style of paper. Although, in general, we don't get it cheaper. This certainly doesn't come cheaper. But Corbin's one of those people who I would have paid even more for just because he's Corbin. So he's a small cult artist that I just don't want to miss what he's doing. Wonder Woman Rebirth. This is one of those comics I'm way behind on, and I feel like I have to even go back to issues I did read to try. I can't remember what's going on. I'm all kind of mixed up. This is a comic I picked up at the store. I've been reading a bunch of Valiant and really liking it. So I thought I'd try yet another Valiant #1. Rafer Roberts seems to be a really good writer. I've only read him on Archer and Armstrong, but I just thought he did an incredibly good job on Archer and Armstrong. So I'm definitely wanting to give a try to anything he's writing. And then I picked up Supergirl, which I will not put on my pull. It just doesn't, it's written by Steve Orlando. It doesn't seem very good. But my daughter and I read the last issue digitally because when we saw that she was teaming up with Batgirl, that excited us, and she was going into the Phantom Zone. By the time she did go to into the Phantom Zone by the end of last issue, we were not at all thrilled by the portrayal of the Phantom Zone. It was not fun. And it was kind of, easy apocalyptic kind of stuff, if you know what I mean. But still, she wants to read the next issue, and I realized, hey, with my discount, I can get the digital code and pay the same price for the physical and have both. But I'll probably read it digitally with my daughter. I'm realizing more and more it makes life easier on me to read when we're reading things together, to read them digitally when I can. And then, I think this came out last week, and I heard some people being pretty disappointed by this, and one or two people loving it. I think maybe both for the same reasons, that this is The Divided States of Hysteria by Howard Chaykin. I'm guessing it's kind of politically incorrect and transgressive and maybe offensive to transgender people. I don't know. It's one thing to, in my opinion, to not get transgendered people, because I certainly don't really get it. It's another thing to be violent against them or encourage poor treatment of them in any way. So I'll see if this makes me feel yucky, but I thought the cover was kind of cool, and there was at least one person on Twitter telling me that this was really great. And sometimes I really like his opinions on things. Grass Kings #4 was supposed to be on my pull. Luckily, there were copies at the store, and I think I have that rectified now. Just look at that opening spread there. And Grass Kings is still on the really nice cardboard cover stock and everything. It's just visually beautiful. It's not wowing me on the character level, although it is a story of character and an odd concept of a kingdom within our United States that rules itself, and it struggles against a kind of evil sheriff living next door. Well, it looks like the art's getting quite sketchy. Oh well. Still love that opening there. This cover's quite cool. It takes a little while to process what's going on that cover. So that's everything I pulled. I think when I saw that Ghost Critic got the Shaky Cane book, what's it called? Something Coffin. I was hoping that somehow my shop would have gotten it late too, but my shop did not get it. I had not known about it in advance to order it. So now I just want to show you some stuff I've been reading lately. 2 weeks ago, the New York Times Magazine, and maybe other people knew about this, but it caught me totally by surprise. We just happened recently to start getting the New York Times Saturday and Sunday newspapers on the weekend. Anyway, the New York Times Magazine came out with something called New York Stories that is an all comics issue. But it's a very newspaper comics. So everything, all the comic book stories in here, well, the editorial is even a comic strip, which was kind of cool. All the stories in here are stories from New York that were reported in the Metro section of the newspaper at some time, and those Metro section stories have now been adopted into little mini comics. And here's the table of contents, and apparently David Mazzucchelli, for instance, is there. Quite notable is where'd he go? Franco Francavilla is in here. I thought he did the last story, which I assume would be there. Terror and Mystery. Is there another contents page? Oh well. Anyway, I guess the letters page is not in comics, but then all the rest is in the form of comics. And I found it an odd thing to adopt news stories, human interest stories into comics. I think they thought it would come out, you know, like slice of life indie comics, and there is a degree to which it succeeds on that level, and then there are other times where it just really falls flat. The art is almost all the art in here is really great comics art or illustrative art at sometimes. So sometimes it just felt like an illustration of a news story rather than bringing the story to life. This is a wordless one that is really cool. And at the beginning of each story, they tell you what the original story was and when it was published. So this is based on a story published in the New York Times in 2007, which they titled "Raising Sash for a View of New York City's Daily Ballet." But then it's titled "The Window Gazers." So we just get a series of New York looking out the window kind of scenes, along with a little elderly romance, I guess you might call it. Anyway, I'll just thumb through this a bit. Nothing too much stood out to me. I enjoyed reading all of it, but I also was not wowed by all of it because of, like I say, a lot of it just feels like kind of a showing, not telling, or illustrations that are pleasing but aren't really the driving force in the stories. And they only kind of credit the artists as if did the artists fully adapt these stories themselves, or did the editor come in and put in the text? I almost wonder about that, because in newspapers, editors have a strong hand. So yeah, here's an example of one that's beautifully illustrated, and it was just a pleasure to look at with these double page spreads. I'm not sure who this artist is. Wesley Alsbrook, never heard of him. So some of these people may or may not be comic book artists. They may just be illustrators taking their hand at doing a little comic strip. But if you somehow have access to the Sunday New York Times of 2 weeks ago and you are a fan of sequential art, I would just, like if you have a friend or a neighbor who gets this, or a newsstand that keeps older issues, I would grab this. It's well worth your time. And it's kind of a nice cultural moment in a way. The first time the New York Times, one of our cultural bastions, has decided to do an all-comics magazine. And the New York Times magazine is quite the prestigious place. I'm sure they paid people quite well. A lot of these are stories of like quirky people, human interest stories. This is about bird smuggling. Here is the Francavilla one, and it's about, even though it was written in 2002, it's about a attempt at Germans to sneak into the United States and do terrorism during World War II. Right up Francavilla's alley, really, and it looks beautiful, but it is, in these panels, just told It's just a story just told to us about what happened. So it's kind of a shame. I would have thought if Francavilla did it himself and had, maybe it's also a matter of space. If you give the artist only 1 or 2 pages, or 3 to 4 pages, they can't really do a whole lot with storytelling, expanding the story. So anyway, just wanted to show you guys that, for those of you who didn't know about it. It was a total surprise to me. I really liked the finale of the Flintstones. I was a bit surprised and shocked that it was kind of a bit of a happy ending, and on a positive note for humanity a bit, and also a bit of a happy ending for the animals, or some of the animals who are used as utilities in the Flintstones world. The finale of Reborn kind of fell flat. I don't know why. It seemed like it had all the elements there, and saying that she was in a coma and almost came back to life and then kind of chose death, or chose to go to this reborn world, was kind of clever. Although, I still don't, maybe it's still all in her head during that last moment of dying or something. I don't know. There's a hint that people go on to heaven from there. Paper Girls was cool as ever. This was a slightly denser issue. The girls kind of took some steps forward. Anyway, occasionally I think, well, maybe I should stop getting Paper Girls or wait for trade. Certainly makes sense, but I really enjoy the art in the floppy setting without worrying about the gutter loss or anything. And it's, a well-priced comic book. The odd thing about Paper Girls to me is the letters page at the end, which is still totally focused on pretending that this is all about paper girls and having people write in about their experiences about being a paper boy or paper girl, because this has had nothing to do with delivering papers for about, what issue are we on now? We're on issue 15. So I would say for the last 12 to 14 issues, there's been nothing about delivering papers here. So to still kind of do the tongue-in-cheek, this is all, tongue-in-cheek pretend paper delivery association and everything just seems silly. But I'm really looking forward to the next issue. It says it's on, oh man, there's a long wait. It's on sale, next issue is on sale in October. That's a long way away. Well, I hope, I'm sure it's selling well. And my shop says he can't sell individual issues, but it's one of his best-selling in floppies. So I don't know what to make of that. But. And then, so I'm picking up a lot of Valiant. I really loved Exo Man of War. I flipped through this Eternal Warrior comic at the shop, and it also looked like Exo Man of War, looked kind of Conan, barbarian, ancient times kind of storytelling with cool art that kind of harkens back to the old Savage Sword of Conan style of things that I used to like so much. So I bought it, and for $3.99 it was about 28 or 32 pages of actual story. It was a one-and-done story, completely finished by the end, although, of course, you want to see more adventures of the Eternal Warrior. So I hope it leads into, I think it is a one-shot, but I hope it leads into an Eternal Warrior series coming up. I think there was an Eternal Warrior series earlier on, and I did not get it. If it was this good, then I feel bad for not getting it. This was written by Robert Venditti, who I feel like has done much better work at Valiant than he has at DC. Issue 2 of the fantasy story Eternal Empire, I dropped it. This issue was okay. I'll probably read it in trade someday. The coloring, although it's done by the artist, doesn't seem to serve the story. It seems to obscure things too much. This might have been a style of coloring that when the Luna brothers first started might have seemed really cool. kind of looking a little bit like color from a movie still or something, or an animation movie still. But to me, it really impedes the pleasure of the comic. I'm not dropping it because of the coloring. I would say it's not, and maybe Luna's artwork is just not that well suited to a fantasy story, because one of the pleasures of a fantasy world is having the rich world building, and it doesn't feel that way yet. Maybe that will develop in time. I just don't feel patient for it. So yeah, we'll probably pick it up in trades later. Hopefully it succeeds and there'll be lots of trades, but if it doesn't, you can blame me. I don't think I talked about Shaolin Cowboy 2 yet. I loved Shaolin Cowboy 1. I love Shaolin Cowboy 2 in this Who Stopped the Rain series. It was hilarious, and I loved that halfway through we just switched over to a long backstory of this giant pig and his hatred for humans. and in particular his hatred for the Shaolin Cowboy. It was hilarious, clever, unique. At least I have not read anything like this. Plus just the amazing art and color. So to me, this Shaolin Cowboy is a home run. One of the comics that I'm more than glad to pay $4 for. I feel like I really get my value there. Just quickly mention, speaking of value, there were these two $1.50 Alterna comics that I put on my pull list. I think they're each are limited series, 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. Both were about people in the real world who interact with a fantasy world, so that was interesting. But I did not like the art too much in either of them. I was not terribly gripped by the story in either of them, so that's kind of unfortunate. I think they basically had some good ideas here, so I don't know. And I read up on Alterna, and now I realize that it is a place that publishes and distributes creator-owned comics, but it does not pay the creators. So the creators perhaps get money sometime down the line if their comic sells okay. But it's not self-publishing because they do go through a submission process, and so it's like almost like self-published comics, but with a curator involved. So we'll see. I hope that Alterna succeeds and produces some cool comics and pays these artists and stuff. I will, since it's $1.50 and each one of these is a limited series, I'll let them roll and see how they go. Maybe they'll get better. Maybe I'll get into them more. I couldn't really convince my daughter to read either of these with me. Lilith Dark, because it opened with kind of a gross scene, although it turned out not to be real, just a fantasy of these creatures eating hands. She couldn't get past that page. Aquaman, the continuing Dan Abnett scripted series that I've been really liking a lot. It kind of, the last couple of issues dipped down a bit, and I was afraid maybe Aquaman had jumped the shark, not to make any funny pun or anything. But this issue 24, really perked up again, and I'm kind of excited to see where Abnett's going to take it next. He is switching artist teams, so I think starting with next issue, there's going to be Stefan Sevcik on it, and he's certainly a very fine artist, so we'll see if he's a good Aquaman artist. I will miss Eaton and I forget the other person who does the other issues, but I will miss their style. They were very plain vanilla in some ways, but very good storytelling. Really went well with Abnett's scripts, I thought. I'm not sure. I think maybe Aquaman is moving to monthly, which means the price goes up, which means I become more critical of it issue to issue and more likely to drop it quickly. Action Comics, I just wanted to show this crazy butt. I don't understand this cover at all. I mean, Superman's not dressed like Superman. The whole cover focuses on his butt, and sort of vaguely in the background are members of the Suicide Squad who are not in this issue. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe Suicide Squad will show up in the next issue, which I just got from the store, so I'll see. Bug, The Adventures of Forger was a big letdown for me. I was so excited for the all-red art covering lots of obscure Kirby DC Obscura. But the whole story was one of those, it's just a dream, and had nothing to keep you interested in it. And it seemed like the dream, the dream setup was just there to be able to draw cool scenes and throw in any Kirby character you want. I hope all 6 issues don't feel like this. The artwork is still worth it, and I'm kind of a little bit, not entirely, but a little bit of an obsessive collector of things that are tributes to Kirby in some way, fashion, or another. So I will, but the art alone makes up for it, but I will happily collect these 6 issues, and maybe I'll enjoy the next issue better because my expectations will have been lowered. Black Cloud 2 came out a while ago. I jumped on this because of the artist and the colorist, and the color's pretty good. The art, to me, just is not nearly as exciting as the same artist's work on Airboy, and that slightly transgressive autobiographical comic he did with James Robinson. It's okay, the art's okay, but the story completely makes no sense to me, and I'm just reading too many comics. There's not a particular reason why I should stick with this comic, so I'm dropping it. Old Guard. I've been really enjoying this. I've kind of referred this as a kind of pulpy action story, and I suppose it still is, but in issue 4, it really gained a lot more emotional weight, which, with some more interesting backstory, giant penis, giant-ish penis, speaking of Airboy. And I love the color and the artwork, except kind of for the way Fernandez does faces. But the storytelling and the color and everything is really good here, the use of blacks. And so I'm kind of sad to hear this is, I think it's just a 5-issue, so I think next issue will be the last issue. This is another one that gives you, unlike a Marvel comic, a lot of bang for your buck. I think there's about 28 pages per issue of artwork and story, not counting any letters pages or anything. Maybe even more than 28 pages. And also amazing that it's come out on a consistent schedule despite all of that page count. Maybe it will come back for a second volume. And then I want to mention that I finally read out to the end of the first season of Renato Jones and the 1%, which is this crazy left-wing violent fantasy with amazing art. And once I let go of my objections to its political analysis of things, I found myself enjoying it a lot. Clearly, Carey Jones is further to the left than I am, although many people would say I'm pretty on the left. But, and maybe now that Donald Trump is president, I'm willing for more wild, over-the-top satire from the left against the rich and the right. I don't think it's really against the right so much as just against the rich, I suppose. Anyway, it's just a really cool comic to read. And so I really wanted to get season 2, and I put it on my pull list, and they forgot to pull it. And I'm not reminding them now because I think 2 issues have come out. I don't want to read it without reading all the issues in a row. So I'll just get it in trade, or I'll find back issues in bins at some other store. But I think it's a really interesting and kind of daring comic to do, if you don't mind the kind of simplistic, over-the-top, violent fantasy revenge against the rich. Okay, I think that's all I should talk about for now. Thanks if you've hung in there all the way to the end of this 35-minute video. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.